Okay, first of all, thanks for the invitation. It's really an honor, I would say, to share this stage with all the most relevant experts that are also defining this industry, but also with all of you that are sharing through creativity, through passion, this, I would say, not sharing, but shaping an industry that is forming in front of us. So just a little personal note, all my, let's say, trajectory started almost 10 years ago when Massimo Moretti, after several discussions, several invitations also to Barcelona, decided to give us the opportunity to start exploring 3D printing in a large format. And it started really by a simple act of opening a door. No? It gave us a machine, the very first open fab machine. And he told us, look, I built this machine, it works with pellet, it's suitable for large scale manufacturing. Why don't you start exploring how could you translate, your design solution into projects and products that are compatible with this new way of making. And this was the beginning of all the story. So sometimes how valuable is to give an opportunity to someone and just bet on connecting with people and generating, with a single act, potentially a whole industry. So today, I know that the conference is about 3D printing, but I want to give you a broader spectrum of what we are doing, but also the aim, why 3D printing? Why shall we engage with this kind of technology? I founded more than 15 years ago a group of companies that is called Noumena. Our main target is to understand spatiality and to shape a new concept of space. A space that is designed and is shaped by data, is shaped by additive manufacturing and material technology. We believe that we can create a new built environment by merging these three verticals. So many years after, I would say 4 or 5 years after, we decided to separate all the action that we were undertaking to build this new spatiality. And we founded 3 companies. One is Noumena Data, which target the usage of computer vision and machine learning to understand spatial analytics, how people inhabit spaces. The second company is LaMáquina, our company for 3D printing in large-scale manufacturing. And the third one is PureTech, which is dedicated to the implementation of material technology into products and construction materials. So today we have a factory in Barcelona of around 1,000 square meters, another factory in Zaragoza, and we just opened a new factory in Milan, which will publicly, I will say, launch in the next few days. But at the very beginning, we had to take a decision. So we had to decide the new methodology of work that we will pick. So we are designers, architects by career, by profession, but the very first step was to step back from design and use everything that we know to start engineering design process. So we started to use, or let's say, all our knowledge to put at the service of design 3D printing, starting to understand how can we compress design protocol into the manufacturing domain of 3D printing capabilities. Evidently dealing with material technology and robotic manufacturing constraints. Evidently, all of these led us to, I would say, a series of new protocols that are connected to 3D printing. One added value for sure, I'm sure that my colleagues will speak about it later on, is circularity. So the possibility to, at the end, use sustainable material or recycled material in a way that give a new life to this waste product. We started to fabricate with products that are coming from other post-industrial waste. And when our product reached the end of life, in 3D printing it's always possible to shred and bring back to the grade 0 these materials and reactivate this cycle of circularity. These are concepts that I'm very sure that, you know extremely well, but based on top of this step, we wanted to implement another approach. We wanted to start thinking not only about circular materials, but also about programmable materials. How can we embed also intelligence into this system, starting to activate or introduce a new behavior into materials that are passive. So with this scope, we launched the company of PureTech. PureTech is dedicated to embedding intelligence into material by introducing the capability of absorbing carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxide, the volatile organic compound into these elements, by converting also all these components into environmentally friendly minerals. We can purify the air, we can decrease the level of contamination into the atmosphere. And we spent almost 10 years in parallel, while Noumena was growing and LaMáquina was growing, to validate all the behavior of this product. We analyze how much CO2 it absorbed. We analyze how many cycles of absorption are connected to this material, in what these products are converted, so which are the byproduct of this conversion. And then we created the third step. When you work on material technology, there are always three steps: the moment of invention, the moment of validation, and then the moment of integration. And this is actually very similar also to the 3D printing industry. I would say it's common when you do innovation. This is the recipe for innovation. So the third step was actually integrating PureTech into the existing industry, and we started to encode this material into textile, paint, plastic, and evidently polymers that are elevated by the integration of this product. At the end of this cycle, I would say this is my favorite slide of all the presentation, we reached ISO certifications. And an ISO certification is the most complicated thing that you can get when you want to really break into the industry. So it's the key that allows your industrial partners or clients to understand the value of what you are proposing. From this moment on, the rest of the presentation will be split into 5 different chapters. And I will explain you a little bit how we are integrating material technology into 3D printing, how we are encoding also data-driven design into the solution that we are building. And you will see, I mean, in a moment, which other chapters are waiting for you. So when we speak about PureTech, evidently, we speak about ecology, at least a new interpretation of ecology. So we started to look into 3D printing at the end as a medium to elevate the possibility to program material, but also to build a new architectural system that is elevated by this material behavior. These are a collection of plans, the pure plans that we designed with the external reference in Carmelo Zappula. And it's a small collection that at the end wants to mimic the phyllotaxis, so the system, let's say the approach or the methodology of growth the plants have by using computational tools, and expand in this way the surface that is in contact with the atmosphere, and therefore the behavior of absorption that our plants have. Then we replicated or we reinterpreted the same approach, the integration of 3D printing and material technology in this project of the Venice Biennale in 2021. In this case, we encoded, or let's say we embedded PureTech into this red thread that acts like the roots of a new intelligence that is growing over our built environment. And again, we gave another interpretation in the Venice Biennale of 2023 with this structure that instead is designed by Marcella Del Signore. And in this case, we applied PureTech not in the filament, but as an external coating to maximize the absorption capacity. And last year, we also collaborated with Maria Kupsova, again for the Venice Biennale, in this time shaping integrating PureTech into this compound that is based on wood fibers. And we created this big sculpture that at the end is a maximization of all the connection, or let's say the molecular connection that are occurring inside the tree to allow the tree to grow over time. But I would say that in the exploration of how can we integrate material technology into 3D printing, for sure the Spanish pavilion of the Expo Dubai represented a very important point for our company. In this case, that is almost not visible, but in this project, we introduced 1,447 different components for the World Expo of Dubai 2020 that was celebrated in 2021. We fabricated also 192 different elements for the wall at the end for this big tree, and we created a huge interactive space, again designed by Carmelo, that is acting like a big video game, so a huge space that is meant for interaction with a huge video game at the end that is challenging you or your knowledge about sustainability, which also got us the award as Best Interactive Installation of the World Expo of Dubai. But also in Dubai, in 2023, we participated in the COP28. That was a very special invitation. Stella McCartney selected PureTech among the 12 companies that are reshaping, that could reshape the fashion industry. And as a good Italian, I also propose ourselves as the builders of the pavilion. So in this case, we fabricated a series of small pods that were hosting all the different innovators that were showcasing their project and their innovation in the COP28. But this time we wanted to challenge a design methodology. So we fabricated something extremely banal. It was not driven by a complex design logic, but instead by an assembly intelligence. So this is a system that is designed for disassembly. We use for this occasion a cellulose acetate material, was never used before at this scale. Well, we discover, as many other moments, that the material was not still totally suitable for 3D printing. So I almost, well, I will not share in detail with all of you the whatever happened. But at the end, we also went to, we ended up modifying the grade of the polymer in itself. But this tells you a lot about, I would say, this historical moment where at the end, the whole industry is also raising in terms of maturity. So it's constantly a dialogue between the innovation from the material side, the manufacturing side, and also the design protocol. In any case, this approach really worked. And in fact, after 1 year, we shaped all the installation to New York for the climate pledge that was organized by Amazon. And it was once again a very good moment to validate 3D printing capabilities also in terms of design and assembly protocol. And the one last project that is incorporating PureTech for sure is the Pure Sealing. This is one of our first products that we launched in the market. It is a very simple system that at the end incorporates PureTech into this sealing component. While it's 3D printing? It's 3D printed to maximize by 7 times the surface of absorption, increasing the capability of elimination of CO2 of our material. And in the Design Week of Milan, we also built another set of furniture components, this time for Barilla, mixing a new grade of material, again, trying to deal with the design and material innovation in a creative way. But another, I would say, important chapter of our trajectory is the one of ceramic. Your timer is off, so I mean, you will tell me. Is the world of ceramic. So how can we use 3D printing also to connect with craft, with the previous industry, pre-industrial industry? And in this case, we started by exploring, again, design protocol. We started by printing in ceramic and understanding also with with artisan, how can we control the fabrication of ceramic manufacturing or 3D printing, and how can we include also some small elements in the making that at the end require a post-processing by hand to ensure that at the end the piece is fabricated properly. And this, I will say, this project represented for us the very first connection with the local industry of Ceramica Cumeia, and we started to dialogue a lot with them and learn from them, and this became a very critical, I mean, a super important moment of our story. We started to control the glazing of all the ceramic tiles. We started to leave, even in the and mark, even on the individual tiles, I will say the steps to allow then the craftsmen in Ceramica Cumeia to spray and leave the glazing in the right position. And all this knowledge at the end became for us a very important moment to jump into the next project. So this is the Natural History Museum of London. In this case, we fabricated more than 24 tons of ceramic in approximately in 2 months. But it also represented, I would say, a strategic shift from the 1,447 different components of the Spanish pavilion of the Expo Dubai to the 1,664 pieces that we installed in the Natural History Museum, but this, in this occasion, belonging to 51 families. So one very important step for us was also how to deal with the uniqueness when you have to face large-scale production, and also that is a very important, crucial step to avoid also collision or complexity in the construction and in the construction site where all these pieces need to be installed. Now I will just say that the next two speakers will present you this project, which for us is also a very important connection. So with the team of IOS, you will also see whatever is happening for 3D printing tiles and manufacturing. I will not disclose anything more, so I'll let you present. But I will conclude this chapter with this other project. So we recently also inaugurated the cross of the Sagrada Família. For us, after 16 years, I'm Italian, I moved to Barcelona 16 years ago, and after 16 years, this project for us really represented another milestone in our trajectory, but I would say, again, a milestone of a new collaboration workflow. So this is possible only because we mixed computational design, digital craft, and traditional craft into a new method of fabrication. In fact, we didn't print anything of what you see here. We fabricated the molds that were necessary to leave or to lay down all the different tiles. So we had to calculate all the negative parts that at the end represented the 3D printed bed that was fired together with the tiles for a very specific reason of maintaining at the end the tile stability and mechanical properties. And again, this was a fabrication process that we executed using the state-of-the-art technology, so all tools that you know very well. In this case, we fabricated with an extruder from WASP. And at the end, all the results are visible on the landscape of Barcelona, and fingers crossed, we are not done with the Sagrada Família yet. So another chapter, the third chapter for our story, for sure, is the chapter of retail. So while we were growing in between the material research and the connection with traditional craft, we also started to explore in which sector could we introduce the fastest this kind of technology. So in Dubai, we fabricated in the summer of 2020 this store, which, if I'm not wrong, is the first 3D printed store in the world. In the Dubai Mall, another store that was designed for disassembly. We printed the store. This is the first 3D printer that Massimo Moretti gave me, by the way. We had to put material by hand, and there was a printing time of maybe 700, 800 grams per hour. So you could fill the cone with 7-8 kilos, more or less, before going to sleep. And you had to make sure that you were in front of the machine early in the morning if you didn't want to lose your piece. And this piece was around 35 hours. So there are a lot of, or let's say a couple of books related to the Italian trip. You know, many architects were going to visit Italy in the 18th century to see all the marvels in this country. And in one of the trips, there is a beautiful comment from Piranesi that he made about Faenza and also Firenze, the Palazzo Pitti, no Faenza, but Firenze, the Palazzo Pitti. So in front of Palazzo Pitti, there were a lot of stone that were the ones used at the end for the facade. And the landscape in front of the building was the dynamic environment that was changing over time while the tiles were assembled. I would say that one of the fascinating parts of our job is that suddenly our factories become one of these landscapes. They are filled with pieces that at the end disappear suddenly to appear in the location where they need to be installed. So this is instead another store that we did in 2023 for the airport of Fiumicino, and it was the first time that we had to face the challenge of matching the fire regulation. So we had to install these 3D printed pieces in a space that is highly regulated, and we had to comply with the BS1D0 fire regulation, and in the same time we started also to explore a little bit a new degree of freedom that we could execute using a 6-axis robot. So all these pieces are fabricated by calibrating an external mold and extending the fibers of these pieces in a way that makes all the component more mechanical stable. This is instead the second store. I mean, you have to use a little bit of imagination, but we did this one in the Abu Dhabi airport. Evidently here we change the method of fabrication. This time we also use a different material, in this case Mitsubishi material that was reinforced with fibers, so a PIPG that is also coming from waste material. And instead, this is another project that I found very interesting. It's a sealing system that we install in Lucerne. It's a project that I would say it's a little bit smarter, because normally when an architect comes to you, it comes with this 3D printed model, which is normally never sliced into components. Instead, in this project, the joinery, so all the connection between the panels were part of the design system, which is something that you need to take into consideration if you want to build architecture, because our spaces are built by different materials that are accumulated next to each other. This is another project that we built in Kuwait. We fabricated the project recently, but again, I would say it's a project that was executed off-site, then installed without the need of us going there. So another way of, at the end, calibrating not only fabrication, but the execution with local craft. And then speaking about hospitality, evidently the Real Madrid Stadium, where we explore, I would say, a full agenda of materials that we could embed into the space. So we fabricated with ceramic, with polymers, we embedded resins into these pieces. So it was quite interesting research at the end brought us in the world of football. There is a market that we are exploring quite a lot. And now, I still have 12 minutes. I'm speaking very fast, no? Right. Maybe I drink a little bit of water, if you don't mind. Because I'm in the chapter 3. Yeah, 4. Okay. Okay, so chapter 4. In this case, instead, I want to introduce you to the other company, Noumena. So we saw a little bit what can we do with 3D printing in terms of material exploration, in terms of craft, let's say reinterpretation of craft, but also in terms of, I will say, retail spaces, hospitality. But once a space is built, how can we learn from this space? There is a nice interview from Renzo Piano, maybe 14 years ago, where he's asked on which is his favorite moment when he complete a building. Renzo Piano says that one of his favorite moments is to hide in the moment of the opening and observe how people start to inhabit the space that he designed. And he said that normally, or all the time, people start to inhabit the space in a way that is really unpredictable that he could have said before. And for us, this brings a lot the topic of vision, of observation. There is a nice phrase from Fei Fei Li. She says that vision starts with the eye, but occurs in the brain. Leonardo said something different, but is actually in the same line. He says that chi perde la vista perde la veduta. Who lose the sight lose the capacity of understanding. Okay, and it's like a dead body on Earth that cannot perceive the beauty of perspective, of architecture, of the universe, of the stars. And every time that Leonardo described the eye, it always connects the eye to the brain. So there is always a connection between the system of data collection and the system of data processing. And if you look into the instruments that we have for spatial representation, also these instruments might come from a different domain. These are the plans of Raoul Auger, who is the father of modern ballet. And I would say these are very first spatial representation how people could move in a space, even though these are a top-down representation, a mechanical protocol of execution. You can see that in the history of data analytics, there are several approaches that wants to, at the end, analyze how people move in a space. No? This unpredictable data at the end is very difficult to catch. And you can see also that now this data is coming a lot from another domain that is the one of sport. So we use 3D printing as the instrument to start collecting this kind of information. So in the first store that we fabricated in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia in 2022, we actually put all the companies into one ecosystem. So these are 3D printed panels. We modified the extruder of WASP, introducing at the end a manual system to integrate a gradient into these 3D printed panels. But in the ceiling of the space, we also installed 7 small digital eyes, like the eye of Leonardo, that suddenly elevated our capacity to see the space. So we started to look into the space as a digital representation of our built environment, where suddenly we could start to collect data, information on how people were inhabiting the space. And we also started to explore the way of programming not only material or machines, but also the same space in itself. So how can space at the end act over time? And we started to introduce also this system at the end in a larger project that we fabricated, again, small exploration that at the end started to tell us more and more and more and more on how people interact in a given space, which is the level of attraction to one component or the other. And now this is all brought together in the collaboration that we are making with Deportivo La Coruña. Deportivo gave us a small chunk of the stadium, and we started to fabricate a lot of pieces for the renovation of the store. We fabricated, I would say, 152 components, approximately 640 square meter of 3D printing area. And we introduced, evidently, in all this space, all our system for data analytics, and we started to use the information at the end also to distribute products, to design target campaign, to start embedding also smart stock management. At the end, everything that we can do to start learning from this world, this small universe. And all this learning, at the end, all this exploration is projected in our goal, in our intention, to a larger ecosystem. And the larger ecosystem that we have are our cities. So in our cities, we did something very similar. In Barcelona, we started to analyze how the city of Barcelona is integrating new approaches, new interpretation of what is a public space. We introduced our cameras for spatial analytics to analyze and understand the old traditional mobility infrastructure, and then support the activation of a new way of conceiving public spaces and viability, at the end creating data-driven instruments to translate or modify mobility, giving back to pedestrian the usage of the space, and creating habitats that are much less prone to a sustainable life. So we started to analyze the activation of a project that in Barcelona is called the Green Axis, which is substantially a project that transforms through the mobility the way that streets are used in the middle of the city. And we analyzed the before and after of this activation, creating at the end all the important KPI that allow you to program this kind of intervention. And by the way, I mean, Netherlands is the homeland of this approach. In Barcelona, we call this super block. Here, you call it Wonnerf is the name of the mobility street that you have here in Holland. And for whatever instead occur on this passive surface, we started also to apply PureTech into the public space, into the built environment, converting this infrastructure into active systems that are absorbing CO2, and this is the harbor of Barcelona. We started to use 3D printing also to shape public spaces and create furniture at the end that can generate a different way of living public environment. And this is the very first 3D printed furniture that embed PureTech, and it's called Respira, and it's part of the landscape of Barcelona. And we conclude this trajectory also with our goal to bring technology not only to spaces and buildings, but also to people. And this is, in fact, the latest collaboration that after 9 years we celebrated with Stella McCartney. So in the Centre Pompidou, in the Museum of Renzo Piano, we also launched the collaboration with Stella McCartney, which represents for us the first moment in which PureTech is embedded into textiles, but also a very first moment where material technology becomes reachable. So this is it. Thanks for your attention.